Welcome to the 10 Minutes Gold Mine, where every book gives you a treasure of knowledge in just 10 minutes. I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. Introduction. I Am Legend by Richard Matheson is a gripping post-apocalyptic science fiction novel that delves into themes of isolation, survival, and what it truly means to be human. First published in 1954, the book centers on Robert Neville, the last man alive after a global pandemic transforms humans into vampire-like creatures. It explores how Neville struggles to survive in a world dominated by these creatures, while also questioning the concepts of humanity and morality. Over the years, I Am Legend has inspired multiple adaptations, including the 2007 film starring Will Smith. But what makes the novel so unique and enduring? Let's explore. Part 1. The Desolation of the World. The novel begins with the world in ruins. A plague, which initially appears to be a form of influenza, decimates humanity. However, the virus has a more sinister effect. Those it infects become vampires, or, infected, humans, who are vulnerable to sunlight, feed on human blood, and live at night. Only a small number of humans, including Robert Neville, survive the disease, and he becomes the sole survivor in a world populated by these mutated beings. Neville is immune to the virus, making him unique, but this immunity comes at a severe cost: isolation. His days are spent searching for supplies, reinforcing the barricades of his home, and searching for a cure. Neville's life has become a monotonous cycle of survival. He spends his days hunting vampires, and at night he locks himself inside his house to avoid being attacked. The silence of the world around him only intensifies his sense of loneliness and despair. What is remarkable about Neville's situation is how it forces him to come to terms with the fragility of civilization and the nature of human connection. As he fights to survive, he is constantly reminded of the loss of his family and friends. This early part of the book highlights the profound psychological toll that isolation can have on an individual. Neville is not just fighting to stay alive physically, he is also battling his growing madness, driven by the loneliness of a world devoid of human life. Part 2. The Vampires. The vampires in I Am Legend are not the typical, grotesque monsters often seen in traditional vampire lore. Matheson reimagines the concept of the vampire, turning them into creatures who are more tragic than evil. They are victims of the virus that has infected them, and the novel explores how they are altered by the disease in both mind and body. Neville begins to study the vampires, trying to understand what makes them tick and how he can use their behavior to his advantage. He notes their sensitivity to sunlight, their need for blood, and their nocturnal nature. The vampires, though mindless in their bloodlust, seem to retain traces of their human selves. Neville wonders if they still have a sense of identity and whether they can be redeemed or cured. This scientific approach reflects his desire for a solution, for a way to bring back the world he once knew. He even captures and experiments on vampires, trying to find some way to reverse the infection. Despite his efforts to learn more about them, Neville is confronted by an unsettling truth. These vampires have evolved into a new species with their own rules, fears, and culture. They are not just mindless killers but have formed a new society. This realization forces Neville to confront his own role in this new world. He has been hunting them, seeing them as the enemy, but now he must ask himself, are they truly the monsters, or is he? Part 3. The Struggle for Survival. As time passes, Neville becomes increasingly desperate. His daily routines become more focused on survival rather than finding a cure, and his mental state deteriorates. He struggles with feelings of guilt, anger, and loneliness. Despite being immune, Neville is increasingly haunted by the sense that he may never escape this nightmare. His battle is not just physical but psychological. He starts to question his own sanity and whether it is worth continuing the fight. The days blur together, and he often feels as though he is drifting toward madness. This psychological aspect of the novel is one of its most profound features, as it forces the reader to confront the psychological toll of surviving in such a hostile world. What would it be like to be the last human being on Earth? To see humanity reduced to a nightmare of vampires and loneliness. In this period of increasing despair, Neville begins to turn inward. He begins to lose his sense of self, as his identity becomes more and more tied to survival. The world around him is changing, and he is forced to adapt to this new reality, even though it means abandoning many of the values and morals that once defined him. Part 4. The appearance of the woman. One of the most significant turning points in the story occurs when Neville encounters a woman named Ruth. She appears to be a fellow survivor, and her sudden appearance gives Neville a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, Neville has someone to talk to, someone who might understand his struggles and his loneliness. At first, Neville is overjoyed by her presence, but as the story unfolds, he begins to notice inconsistencies in Ruth's behavior. She exhibits strange habits and has a peculiar way of avoiding certain topics. Neville grows suspicious, and his initial optimism turns to doubt. Could Ruth be one of the vampires? Has she come to deceive him? Or is she truly human, and if so, why is she behaving in such an odd manner? Ruth's appearance in the novel serves to further complicate Neville's understanding of the world around him. If Ruth is indeed one of the infected, then Neville's assumptions about the vampires are wrong. He begins to realize that the world he is living in has changed in ways he cannot fully comprehend. This moment forces Neville to confront the idea that perhaps the New World Order, with the vampires as the dominant species, is not as black and white as he once thought. Part 5. The Ultimate Revelation. The final revelation in I Am Legend is a shocking twist that forces Neville to reassess his entire worldview. As the story progresses, Neville learns that the vampires are not merely mindless creatures but are evolving. They have developed their own society and have begun to build a new world. The title I Am Legend becomes significant here because Neville realizes that in this new world, he is the monster. His actions, while driven by survival, have placed him in direct opposition to this new species. He is no longer the hero of the story, he is the villain. The novel ends with Neville coming to terms with his fate. He understands that he is no longer part of the world he once knew. The new world belongs to the vampires, and he is a relic of the past. This ultimate realization raises profound philosophical questions about survival, humanity, and the inevitability of change. Neville is no longer the legend he once believed himself to be. Instead, he is the last of his kind, a man who will soon be forgotten by history. Conclusion. Richard Matheson's I Am Legend is a powerful exploration of the psychological and moral dilemmas that come with survival in a post-apocalyptic world. Through Robert Neville's journey, the novel delves into themes of loneliness, identity, and the shifting nature of good and evil. The story challenges the reader to think deeply about the consequences of survival and the price one pays for being the last of humanity. The ending, with Neville realizing that he is now the monster in a world ruled by the infected, serves as a poignant reminder of how quickly the balance of power can shift. What do you think of Neville's actions throughout the story? Do you agree with his decision to hunt down the vampires, or do you see his role as more complex? How do you interpret the idea of being a legend in a world that has moved on without you? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. That's it for today's 10 Minutes Gold Mine. If you found value in this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep mining for more golden knowledge. See you in the next one.